In a world of rising tensions and echoing lies, the war for Ukraine is more than a battle over territory. It's a battle over truth. Who shapes the narrative shapes the future. This is the story of disinformation, historical denial, and a nation that refuses to be erased. A nation that, despite centuries of imperial suppression, Soviet famine, and now missile strikes and tanks, continues to raise its flag, speak its language, and defend its people. Ukraine's identity is not fragile. It is forged in defiance. Each school rebuilt, each concert held in a bunker, each vote cast, each soldier's stand. It is all a refusal to be erased. Disinformation does not need an army. It only needs a platform. From the echo chambers of state-run news to primetime punditry, a storm of messaging clouds the truth. Tucker Carlson paints Ukraine as corrupt, NATO as the aggressor, and Russia as misunderstood. His broadcasts are rebroadcast across Russian media as validation. The Kremlin repeats its old playbook: invent Nazis, fabricate threats, justify war. In this narrative, Ukraine is not a sovereign country. It's a mistake of history. And Donald Trump? He echoes appeasement. Offer territory, pause support, restart business. The result is not peace. It's surrender disguised as strategy. The facts are clear, even when the fog is thick. Misinformation may travel fast, but truth stands unshaken by its pace. Ukraine declared martial law after Russia launched its invasion. Wartime elections are illegal under Ukrainian law. Not a sign of tyranny, but necessity. Ukraine is not part of NATO, but it seeks membership because it needs protection, not because it threatens. NATO's core principle, Article 5, offers collective defense, a deterrent against future aggression. Ukraine does not seek to join NATO to launch attacks against Russia, but to defend its sovereignty and people from the very incursions it has already endured. History shows that countries within NATO's shield are rarely attacked. Ukraine knows this, and so does Russia. And those Russian-speaking Ukrainians? Russia claims to protect them, but it is their homes Russia destroys first. Mariupol, a predominantly Russian-speaking city, was reduced to rubble by Russian bombardment. Kharkiv, where Russian is widely spoken, was shelled relentlessly. Schools, hospitals, and apartment complexes were leveled not by foreign invaders, but by the very force that claimed to come in peace. In the name of protection, Russia wages extermination. Their so-called liberation comes with no voice, no vote, only ash. Zelensky was democratically elected in a free and fair vote. International observers confirmed the integrity and transparency of the Ukrainian electoral process. He is Jewish, and his family survived the Holocaust, facts that further expose the absurdity of the Kremlin's Nazi Ukraine narrative. Despite these truths, voices like Carlson, Trump, and Witkoff aggressively push the idea that Ukraine is undemocratic. They ignore the reality of martial law, imposed to preserve the nation amid an active invasion, a legal, constitutional measure under existential threat. They twist the suspension of elections, not as a wartime necessity, but as evidence of dictatorship. This is not just dishonest, it is dangerous. To call a country undemocratic for defending itself is to align with the invader's justification. To manipulate public perception while bombs fall on civilians is not commentary. It is complicity in propaganda. The idea that Ukraine is run by Nazis is not just false. It's an insult to the memory of real victims of fascism and a grotesque attempt to justify imperial conquest. Meanwhile, Russia holds so-called elections that international observers routinely call neither free nor fair. Opposition candidates are jailed or exiled, independent media is silenced, and ballot manipulation is widespread. Vladimir Putin maintains power through repression, not representation. In Russia, elections are not democratic rituals. They are performances. When contrasted with Ukraine's vibrant political system, the accusation of dictatorship points in the wrong direction entirely. What truly terrifies the Kremlin is not NATO troops or Western weapons. It is a free and flourishing Ukraine. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. In 1938, Britain and France gave Hitler the Sudetenland, hoping war could be avoided. It was a gamble for peace that only bought time for greater destruction. Within a year, Poland was invaded. In 2014, Russia invaded and illegally annexed Crimea. The West responded not with unified strength, but with limited sanctions and cautious diplomacy. No NATO troops were moved. No red lines were drawn. The Kremlin held a sham referendum at gunpoint and was rewarded with weak consequences. Just like Sudetenland, Crimea became a foothold, not a settlement. And just like 1938, appeasement was mistaken for prudence. Appeasement is not prevention, it's invitation. In 1956, Soviet tanks crushed the Hungarian Revolution. In 1968, they returned to silence Prague. In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia under the same false premise it uses today. When tyrants go unchallenged, they redraw borders with blood. The historical pattern is clear. Every concession becomes a precedent, and every delay in resistance costs innocent lives. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is not an anomaly. It is a continuation of a long imperial legacy, cloaked in modern lies but driven by the same lust for control. Key actors of disinformation. Russian state-controlled outlets such as RT and Sputnik Kremlin. Linked troll farms and bot networks Tucker Carlson and segments aired on Fox News later rebroadcast in Russian media Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff. Promoting policies favorable to Russian interests. Far-right populist influencers amplifying Kremlin talking points on social media. Disinformation is not harmless. It is not debate. It is a weapon. When falsehoods are repeated enough, they wear away truth like waves on stone. And when truth falls, so does accountability. We cannot afford to be neutral in the face of distortion. Every manipulated post, every dishonest headline, every false equivalence, these are not just opinions. They are precursors to missiles. Lies on screens become policies on paper, and policies become actions. When disinformation is allowed to fester, it does not stay online. It crosses borders, topples democracies, and buries the innocent. Trump's interest in appeasement mirrors his prior aggressive attempts to purchase Greenland and his openly transactional stance towards Canada and European allies, prioritizing personal and economic gain over diplomatic integrity. Witkoff's extensive business investments in Russia highlight a clear conflict of interest, raising troubling questions about their motivations. Their actions reveal a troubling truth. To them, peace is not the objective. Profit and personal enrichment take precedence over justice and democracy. Trump's aggressive and transactional diplomacy towards traditional allies like Canada, his failed attempt to purchase Greenland, and his combative international rhetoric risk isolating America, pushing it dangerously close to the status of Russia as an aggressive pariah state. His confrontational style undermines global democratic alliances and emboldens authoritarian actors, eroding trust and cooperation essential to international stability. America's economic strength and global influence are possible precisely because of its diplomatic alliances, cooperative international relationships, and steadfast respect for international norms such as the United Nations Charter.
Greenland is a big deal because of its strategic location and its mineral resources. It's a real estate deal. A lot of things could be done.
Transforming into a pariah state through confrontational diplomacy not only undermines its credibility, but actively empowers rivals like China and Russia. It narrows economic opportunities, weakens trading networks, and ultimately makes America less prosperous and less secure. America's strength and global standing have always been rooted in alliances, diplomacy, and unwavering respect for the United Nations Charter. Abandoning these principles in favor of confrontational tactics risks undermining decades of international cooperation and credibility. Echoes of appeasement still ring through history. There are those who now say, let Russia keep Crimea, let Ukraine give up land, let the war end with a business deal.
We need to look at lifting these sanctions. It's time to make a deal and end this conflict.
Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff have floated ideas of lifting sanctions, dividing Ukraine, and cooperating with Russia, as if war crimes can be negotiated away. To shake hands with the butcher while the blood is still wet is not diplomacy, it is complicity. It is like signing peace with Nazi Germany and saying, they've won, let's move on. Appeasement doesn't stop wars, it rewards them.
We will not give up our land. We will fight for every inch of Ukrainian soil.
Echoes of appeasement are warnings from the past, reminders that giving into aggressors only emboldens them further. The false promise of peace through concession overlooks the true price: the sovereignty, freedom, and lives of innocent people. Ukraine stands unbroken. It fights on, not just for land, but for the very idea that truth and justice matter, even amidst devastation. Ukrainians continue raising families under missile strikes, rebuilding cities reduced to rubble, and casting votes in shelters lit by candlelight. Yet while Ukraine endures unimaginable loss, voices from abroad speak of peace without justice. Figures like Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff discuss lifting sanctions, dividing Ukraine's territory, and resuming profitable dealings with Russia as though innocent lives and sovereign borders can be traded at a bargaining table. Their peace is transactional, built not on justice, but profit and personal gain. To them, Ukraine's suffering isn't tragedy, it's an opportunity. But history warns us clearly: appeasement does not end aggression, it invites more. Compromising with tyranny has never prevented war, it merely postpones and magnifies the suffering. True justice demands a full withdrawal of Russian forces, accountability for war crimes, reparations for victims, and an unequivocal affirmation of Ukraine's sovereignty. Any resolution short of this is not peace. It is surrender masked as pragmatism. We must choose our future wisely. Either we uphold truth and justice, standing firm alongside Ukraine, or we enable a world where aggression is rewarded, tyranny is profitable, and democracy fades quietly into history. Democracy is worth fighting for because it is the only system built upon the inherent dignity and worth of every individual. It grants people the power to shape their future, ensuring that leaders remain accountable to those they serve. Democracy protects human rights, freedom of expression, and the ability to seek truth openly, without fear. Ukraine itself is a testament to democracy's strength. In 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky, a political outsider leading the Servant of the People Party, won a landslide victory in free and fair elections. Zelensky's presidency represented the power of democratic choice, transparency, and accountability. Ukrainians have repeatedly demonstrated their commitment to democratic principles through vibrant political engagement, peaceful transitions of power, and robust public debate, even under existential threat. Their successful defense of democracy under siege serves as a powerful reminder that democratic values are not fragile but fiercely resilient. When democracy thrives, so does innovation, prosperity, and peace. It provides space for diverse voices, fosters creativity, and ensures justice through fair and impartial institutions. Democracy rejects tyranny and oppression, empowering citizens rather than silencing them. Ultimately, democracy is a promise that each person matters, that their voice is heard, and that their rights are sacred. This promise is why countless generations have sacrificed for it, and why it remains our strongest defense against injustice, authoritarianism, and violence. Democracy does not die from disinformation alone. It dies when the last defender stops believing in it. But so long as even one voice still speaks the truth, so long as even one fighter still believes in freedom, the barrage of lies cannot win. Those who weaponize lies, Tucker Carlson, the Kremlin, and their enablers, do so with the goal of erasing not just Ukraine, but the very concept of democracy itself. To destroy Ukraine's sovereignty is to commit a genocidal act, one aimed not only at a people but at the foundational values that unite the democratic world. And the world is watching. The democratic nations of the earth, diverse in culture but united in principle, stand opposed to this campaign of erasure. They know that to let Ukraine fall is to invite the same fate for themselves, and they will not allow it. The choice is ours. Believe history, or repeat it. Stand for justice, or live with the cost of silence.